talk, faith talk, faith talk, faith talk, faith talk. Can you tell me what it is that you're living for? Can you tell me what it is that you're living for? Faith talk, faith talk, faith talk, faith talk, faith talk, faith talk. Can you tell me what it is that you're living for? Can you tell me what it is that you're living for?
Okay, let us begin. Welcome to my faith-centered conversations. Talking about our souls deep within and different ideas about the world's creation. In different faiths we might find inspiration. So let's engage in healthy conversation. Listen on your phone, at home, with your friends, or when you're alone, and let's talk about life and where we belong. This is
Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk. Can you tell me what it is that you're living for? Can you tell me what it is that you're living for? Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk, Faith Talk. Can you tell me what it is that you're living for? Can you tell me what it is that you're living for?
And then I've got another kind of project coming up in my final year, which is Christian based as well. So
awesome.
It's really cool.
Do you want to give the details on your idea? Okay.
Yeah, so
world exclusive.
So we're for one of our projects, it's all about brand identity. So we have to create a brand, or we have to create a product.
Pressure.
Yeah. Have to create something,
Yeah.
and then inside you would create I don't know, the certain things you see in that that place. So for example, some people are creating let's have a think, like different bars. So somebody's creating a bar, and then they've got to create a logo. They've got to create think about some of the drinks they would do. They've got to think about kind of the style, what the baristas would be wearing, all these kind of different things, or what the bartenders would be wearing. But for me, I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And I remember seeing something about like a Christian museum, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. So my idea and what I'm doing is I'm creating a Christian museum that's going to be based in London, and it's people can go through a journey of the Bible. So every exhibit is going to be a story of the Bible, and they're literally going to walk through it in like 4D. So, for example, one of the...
water splash. When it's Noah's Ark, you're going to have water.
Literally. So one of my ideas, so I've said, okay, well, I'm going to talk about some of the merchandise that they will find in the gift shop. So they can have like, I don't know, a pencil case like from like a loaf of bread, and inside there's like 5 fishes or something like that. Like that's what they can like
Well, it could be a packed lunchbox.
Yeah, it'd be a packed lunchbox or something like that.
Yeah.
So one of the exhibits, which I'm not creating, but I'm having to do so on Photoshop, is the Lion's Den.
Okay.
Daniel and the Lion's Den. And what happens is people are going to go down into this like pit, and then up. If they were to look up, they would see like all of the rest of the people like looking down on them, like as the exhibit kind of goes on. And then they would kind of have all these drawings. And there'd be images, and there'd be kind of words of what the story would look like, and kind of what happens in that passage. And then they would kind of be able to turn around, put on some VR headsets, and then they would see the lions, and they'd be able to see them kind of walking around them. And then all of a sudden they would probably like hear something. I haven't really figured this bit out. They hear something, and then the lions would go to sleep. But they'd basically be able to experience what Daniel experienced as well. And they would be able to see actually there's so much truth in the Bible. It's not just a random book. It's a story, and it's so powerful. And it's of real people and real lives. They're not just
stories; they're real accounts. Real human beings.
So I think that is. I'm really excited about that. I'm really and like when I said it, you have to like stand up in front of my lecturer and say it. He was like, "Love it," and I was like, "Oh yes."
Yeah.
So that's my upcoming project, which is really daunting. But it's.
But then, what is the final thing you have? Because obviously, you can't actually make the real thing.
No, exactly. So yeah. So you'd have to.
How would you sell that? How would you visualize that concept?
So what you do is you would kind of find an image of what you want the front of it to look like. You'd kind of Photoshop lots of different ideas onto there. You'd create a name and a logo, and you would kind of put that all on the kind of the front of the building. You'd kind of have to think about what aspects you're going to find in there. So I talked about like the merchandise. You're also going to have different signs to different areas.
Yeah.
So I kind of got my idea from a big branding company called Pentagram, and they do a lot of redesigning of different places, and one of them was a museum, and I was like, that's very cool. So basically, obviously I wouldn't actually create it, but I'd create the kind of designing for it and
like
the option, the prototype of these different kind of options. So
Nice.
yeah, I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a big
great.
project, but
Great,
I just kind of thought, actually, let's give it a go and go for it.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about sort of the struggles that you've had in terms of either just your the struggles that you've had as a creative person, and the unique struggles of trying to make your faith-based messages work in your projects as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm trying to think. I think some of it might have come from my own personal relationship with God. I think there have definitely been times where I haven't been as close as I'd like to be, just through the different ebbs and flows of life.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely has a big impact on kind of the work you do and the amount of love and that you kind of look at the reasons why you're doing something. So I suppose that for me is kind of been where the challenges have come, because I suppose in a way from me doing these projects, questions have come from friends, and then I've not really known how to answer them because of my own personal relationship with God isn't as good as maybe what it should be. I'm putting on kind of a front and an image, and then that probably gets a bit in the way of my projects sometimes. But on the whole, I have been incredibly blessed. There have been kind of fewer struggles in regards to my work. There's been other struggles in other kind of areas of life, but in regards to creative process, a lot of it has just been due to my own kind of view on where I stand in comparison to my peers. So I have a big thing with comparison. And I think a lot of that comes from my own idea of my lack of identity and not knowing where that is.
And do you think social media has a part to play in that as well?
I think it kind of does. For me personally, it's actually not that big on social media. It was much more from right at the beginning of my year. One of my course mates doesn't remember this, but I remember on our very first kind of lecture, in a way, the introduction, our lecturer said to us, right, okay, look around at the people that you're with now. These are your friends, but in 5 to 10 years' time, you could be competing for the same job. And that just kind of puts a lot of pressure. It puts a lot of pressure, because you kind of think to yourself, okay, well, I'd never done anything with media before. I hadn't studied anything. Some of these people already knew what the rule of thirds was. I didn't even know what that was. And I was kind of there like, I'm not good enough for this. Why am I doing this? So I think I would always come away going, oh, that person's better, so I'm going to step back and let them do it. And then, and specifically probably in regards to filming or something, I've never really been that confident in my own ability in doing that. I've always let somebody that I've seen was more talented. So I said, no, it's okay. Like you do it. I'll just step back and do like the minimum, because it doesn't. Then I'm not having to push myself out there. But yeah, I suppose for me it was kind of looking at these people as I was in competition with them. I think I found that quite hard in regards to comparison and being like, I'm not good enough for. In compared to these people are so much more talented than I am. However, that was completely changed when I did get like a really good award at the end of the year, and like I got recognised for the work that I'd done, which was I just kind of thought God was kind of saying to me, hey, if we're going to say, like, stop thinking that, like, you are good enough, like, I've put you here for a reason, and like I'm going to work through you no matter what you're going to do. You just work hard for me. Don't do it for you, do it for me. And I think trying to glorify God in what I do has been something that I've really been able to like grasp hold and be like, okay, I know what I'm doing this for, and try and get that comparison out of there, because all I can do is be me. And like social media hasn't really been that big of a part of it, even though I know that comparison in that sense can be a big thing. But for me, it was much more on the work.
It's just a human thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
whether
a massively
social
human
media
thing.
is part of it or not. I think it's just within the human nature to look at the people you're surrounded by and say, am I doing something wrong? And, you know, and it's good. It's good to have some sort of care about what
100%. It's good to have healthy competition. Definitely. And I think maybe it also comes from...
And caring about what people think about your work as well. That, to an extent, it is important, definitely.
Yeah, and you can, like, I think also sometimes the challenge is looking at someone's work and going, oh, well done for that, not going, but I think it can also maybe have stemmed from slightly... like when you grow up and you're maybe not as good as maths as other people are, or maybe coming from Cambridge and there being that you have to be good at in academia, and I was never really very good. I hated exams. That's why I'm so glad that my course is 100% coursework all my life. Praise the Lord for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, does that kind of really answer the question? I don't really know if that
does.
Oh
yeah, definitely.
There was lots of different factors, but I have been very privileged.
And I think it's especially hard within creative sectors as well, because everyone's like, the gap between one person's creativity and another person's creativity can be very, very different in terms of how it looks and sounds and feels. And that's a great thing, you know, obviously, the creative nature of the God we serve, you know, he's made such a variety of human beings, and, even within the church, we have so many cultural influences, and there's so many expressions of God's glory.
Yeah, we're not all meant to be the same.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, you are tempted, especially within creative industries, to be like, you know, if they're doing it in that unique way, like, how is there something I'm doing wrong? Which we don't need to worry about that, because every human being is created uniquely for a reason. The way I see it is like a jigsaw puzzle, you know. In order for the world to work in the best way, everyone needs to find out what is unique about them and add that to the bigger picture. And it takes time to understand what your unique contribution is. And it's just being willing to say, to admit that along the way you might make mistakes. It's okay to copy other people for a while, try and emulate your heroes and learn from that, but don't let being like people be your destination, because God has a predestined, unique calling for your life. So find your jigsaw piece to add to the picture. That's kind of what I was thinking recently.
That's lovely. It's a very nice way of putting it.
So have you had any sort of big sort of ideas about what you'd want to achieve in your future, in terms of your passion for radio and where you think the industry is at the moment, and what would you like to see more in sort of this industry that you found interesting?
That's a really good question. The honest answer is I'm not too sure. I think there are many different areas I'd love to see it go. I think not only like the privilege and the greatness of my course is that there are so many different areas.
Exactly.
So
even now, do you feel like there's something that you're specialising in? Or
yeah, so I've actually gone away from radio now, which is really interesting. So I've gone much more towards the television side of things, which but less of the like live, let's say, for example, like This Morning, not that kind of style, much more on like the production and the documentary making side. So for example, I'd love to at the end of my year be able to work for a production house who gets kind of assigned certain projects by big companies like the BBC or ITV or whoever to create documentaries that they're able to produce, and there's a lot of meaning behind them, and I think that is really been a challenge for me in regards to kind of where I will apply for in my future, and looking at whether or not, if I was to apply for this job, will it morally align up with my values and with my faith. And I think that is something that has been I've really kind of thought about in regards to, say, for example, the content that this company makes. Is it do they create things that are really sexual, or do they do things where they're actually really wanting to tell people stories, and they're really passionate about the person. And I think that's something that has been really eye-opening. Future-wise, I can kind of just see, well, I don't really know. I think, and there's used to be a part of me that used to hate saying I don't know, because it just would be like, I'm so uncertain. But I have this great hope that I know that God's going to open doors and he will close doors, and I'm okay with that. But I hate making decisions. So knowing that it's not just down to me, like I'm able to work alongside God, and he's able to guide me and instruct me down different things. But yeah,
I think it's important to have that open-mindedness, and especially in a creative industry, you know, you have to have some sort of sensitivity to what inspires you, and what inspires you can change over time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the culture's completely changing. Like, there's always something new that people are saying, this is the in thing. And you just kind of hope that it doesn't kind of go too far, or that it doesn't go to the point where you're like, oh, that really isn't right. So I suppose, just hoping that you can be distinctive in your industry despite kind of the culture that you're kind of surrounded by.
I'd like to add my own ideas as well. So I think it's exciting times we live in, especially in terms of being an independent creator. I feel like, even for me, sometimes when I think about starting a YouTube channel, or, you know, there's people who've started YouTube channels and they've started companies from that, and now they're their own bosses. You know, there's so many tools nowadays for being in charge of your own art, and I think it's, especially for us as Christians, it's a great time for us to really think about taking control of what we produce, as opposed to working for institutions that already exist. I want, one day I'm inspiring to be in charge of my own corporation. I want to be part of a group of people who say, instead of us trying to change the institutions that already exist, let us build our own brands, our own identity, leverage our own content. And I think that way we'll have better control over the messages we are part of sending out to the world. And I just think it's a testament to the power and the authority that we have through Jesus as well. Like, the amazing thing I love about the gospel is that it's the advantages of Jesus dying and coming back from the grave is multifaceted. So it's not just giving us eternal salvation, but it's allowing us to live life to the fullest on earth. That you know, we hear phrases like the head and not the tail in church a lot, but it's real. Like, God wants us to be owners. He wants us to not just be borrowers, but lenders as well. He wants us to live in abundance, you know. And I feel like us as Christians, let's not lose sight of the kingdom God wants to build on earth, and he does want us to prosper. You know, don't be afraid of being of thinking of yourself as rich and prosperous and being in charge of a multi-million media company. You know, none of these things are wrong, as long as you have the right intention of using that to empower the church and reach people that the church can't reach. As long as that is your central focus, then I think, you know, there's no stopping us. So I just want to encourage you and any other sort of, just for Christians in general, but especially for Christians who plan to use media in some way to put out original content, like, keep pushing the agenda, keep saying, how can I build my own empire, instead of trying to add something to the BBC or adding something. You know, that might be a good starting point, but always think of yourself as an innovator, someone who's in charge of their own sort of company, not for your glory, but for the glory of the one who created you. So that's just the message I want to keep in mind, you know.
Yeah, and I think if I was to, obviously we've spoken a lot of different things about kind of the struggles and many different areas and some of the joys of kind of being a creative and in a creative course at university. I just think, like, it's really cool to be able to say, like, God is choosing to use us. So be like, be there with open arms, say like, God, like take me wherever you want, like whenever you want me.
He doesn't have to, but he's
he chooses to. He wants to.
Gifts.
He wants to, and I think that's something which is so powerful and so amazing that you can be like, okay, well, I'll just kind of stay here and well, not just stay here, but I'll just be here and say, look, God, do you want me to do this? Do you want me to do that? And he might be like, hey, yo, I don't mind as long as you kind of glorify me through that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay for it to be that way. But I think being able to look back and seeing how God has used the highs and the lows to get to where I am now, and to get and kind of be like, okay, if that's what he's done there, what can he do in this next exciting chapter? And I think it's just about being encouraged that no matter what stage you're at, God will use you. And
Amen. Yeah,
I think it's really, really cool and really exciting. And just the fact that we have been created by a creative God, and that there are so many avenues, and that the industry is changing so much. Like we both could be in jobs that don't exist, right now. Like that's so cool. That's so cool that we can be in something that is completely different. But also the amount of people that I know that do a degree and then don't even end up in that like job area. So who knows? We could be in many different areas, but I think that's really exciting. Yeah.
Well, it's been a great interview. It's exactly like 1 hour now.
So. Woohoo! How about that for timing?
Yeah, I think we fitted in quite a lot there. So, I think we'll leave it there.
Cool.
But thank you for spending time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for
Do you want to give people
me?
I don't know if you want to give social media details or how people can see more of your work. If you don't want to share that, then it's fine. But
I don't actually use social media much for my work.
Yeah.
So
it's all right.
Yeah, I did. There's not really anything, but that's a challenge that I need to do.
Part of the journey.
It's part of the journey. It's something that I do actually need to. You've reminded me. I need to add my portfolio to my LinkedIn account and many other areas. So
my LinkedIn is bare right now.
But yeah, I suppose just the thing of if you ever are struggling of what you want to do, or you want to like chat or anything, then like feel free to message. I'm all good with people asking questions and whatnot. So.
And where can people listen to the Three Christians podcast?
Three Christian podcasts. Yeah, it can be found on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, and on almost any other places. But yeah, there's 28 different episodes, and if you guys want some more, then just let us know and we'll see if we can get us three together again. But yeah, it's really cool.
Sorry, one more question. What's been the best thing about podcasting for you?
Ooh. Cool. Best thing about podcasting is I suppose the freedom of it in a way, and being able to know that you like people are intrigued in the different things you're saying, just how like we have this platform to be able to speak about these different things that people didn't really speak about before, and there are so many different avenues. There's kind of in a way too much now, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I think and then also having people,
but that's good in a sense, because it pushes you to keep digging deep and saying what is unique about me that I can bring to the table.
Yeah, exactly. You can't, not trying to be another Christian podcast, but trying to be something that's different. I think also when you get people saying that I listened to a podcast and I loved it, or I was really moved by this, or you just kind of see kind of maybe the amount of people that kind of listen to it, and that's really encouraging and really cool. But however, the thing that I have loved being able to do is, I know quite a few Christians, I don't know if you do have any non-Christian family members, but being able to share the episodes that I've had with my non-Christian family members, I mean, and chatting to them about it, like that's really cool. One of my cousins was like, oh, by the way, I listened to this and I really love this, and my auntie was like, oh, here are some new suggestions of some themes that I'd really love to hear you guys talk about, and I was kind of like, what? Whoa, like this is so cool that my non-Christian family wants to hear these topics be discussed.
I even got a message from some random guy. I haven't even met him in person before. I don't know if it was through. He did say he listened to the episode with Mo in it. I don't know if you listened to that.
Yeah.
And so maybe he was a friend of Mo. I don't know. But he messaged me on Instagram recently and he said, no, I'm not a religious person at all, but I like your content. Keep putting it out. I'm interested. I want to hear more. And I read that and I was like, I wasn't even, I didn't even know that was going to happen. Like I didn't even picture that. So it's funny. You have, I think sometimes with creating content, you do have a certain audience in mind. You feel like you have your main audience, which you're going to reach. And then you have like another part of your audience that you do want to reach, but part of you is thinking, can I actually reach them? And for this podcast, I feel like it's the non-religious people or the people who have no sort of inclination of what a religious or spiritual life is like. And I want to reach them. I want this podcast to be a place where we're honest about where we are in our faith. So if we're angry at God, we can be honest about that on the podcast. Talk about the nuances within each religion and how within each religion there's still conflict, there's still complicated things that we need to navigate, and particularly in the 21st century. And I want to address these people, but part of me feels like, am I really going to be able to do that though? And just receiving that message, those little indications that you're improving, I think that's what you need to pick on as a creative person. Don't just focus on the negatives. Focus on take count of every positive comment that you receive as well, and take that and run with it, because you need all the encouragement to visualize what you want. And if you just plant in doubts in your head all the time, then you might not be able to realize what you want. So sometimes it's hard to do that, but even now, like, I'm remembering all the little compliments that some people have given, and that's what's keeping me going.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's really cool. And I think if you look at the reason why you're doing it,
that's it.
And I think for us it was and it is about putting a new side onto Christianity, and putting the kind of the having a light-hearted, humorous podcast, because we didn't really see that anywhere. And we enjoyed doing it. Like, we love doing that as things, but also having something that it wasn't just like, well, what's the point in me listening to this if it's just a bunch of three people that are just chatting? Like, actually, we needed to make sure that it was it was topical, and it was talking about a theme, so it was thematic. So like the first one we did was called like New Beginnings, and starting out completely afresh. Yeah, the quality of it is a bit naff, but as we go on, it gets better. But like it's talking about things like motivation and failure, and these are things like we're normal people. We aren't people that are perfect. I think was highlighting that in there. But yeah, like it's just a looking at the reason why you started to do that, and not try and change because of what certain people are saying, but keeping your content still fresh and new. But I think podcasts are a great way of also people being able to like listen as they're on their way to work, or do things like where they can it's not like limited to only being live, that they can pause it whenever they want to and start up again. But I think you've got to be very, I think it's fascinating when you can look at things of how long somebody has listened to your podcast for. Like, sometimes you can find out somebody only listened to like the first 15 minutes of it, and you're like, okay, why is that? And it's really eye-opening. But I think having a podcast is really, really cool, and like we loved doing it last year, and last year. So it was
awesome.
It's really love podcasts. They're great fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure like you'd be open to do it again in the future.
Exactly.
If you had the opportunity.
Exactly. I'd love to do it again.
Yeah, I think you should carry on with the podcast, definitely. I think it has potential. I did have in mind to do like a hybrid episode with you guys as well. That would be awesome.
Nah, we're not interested. Nah. Nah, not really about
How
that
much do you charge?
We're priceless, so it's too much. No, I'm joking. No, this has been really, really cool. So thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Thank you for your time.
It's
and
all right.
I wish you and is it Ben and Chris?
Yeah.
I wish them all the best wherever they are. If they're listening right now, greetings to you. And I just hope you three can keep going. But what's most important is God's will, just being open to change, and things will not always be the same as they were before. But and exciting times ahead.
Very much so.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's it. That's the end of my interview with Ellie Bustin. Ellie, thank you for giving your time, for sharing your perspectives and just having that honest conversation with me. And yeah, as always, if you heard something that jumped out to you in a certain way, or you want to discuss what we talked about in further detail, feel free to message me, or either me or Ellie. I'm sure Ellie wouldn't mind. I think it's just great to, again, if you're a creative person, keep asking yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? What's the purpose? What's the bigger goal? What is if I only had one project left in my whole life to do, what would be the one message that I would want to communicate? And I just want to encourage any creative person, regardless of what they believe, to have something to stand for. What do you stand for? Not just as a creative person, but just as a human being. What is the thing that you stand for? What defines you as a person? And obviously, from me and Ellie's experience as Christians, there's a whole lot you can find in knowing what you stand for when you give your life to Jesus. So, thanks for listening, and share with your friends and family. And I wish everyone who's listening the best in life. Have a nice day or evening, whatever time you're listening. Until next time, peace.